but I always think it's a great answer. I don't know. Because a lot of times doctors feel like they need to fill in the blank. And that's why it's like, oh, it's psychological. Look, I answered it. I answered the question. It's psychological. And then we kind of get lost in the world of therapy. Pain is unshareable. You can't feel the pain that I have in my body right now. I have chronic pain right this second. You don't know where, you don't know what it feels like. I can give you metaphors. I could say it feels like my foot is in a campfire. It's burning. My toes are burning. But you can't feel that. You don't know that. But you could choose to believe it. But in reality, I have 2 feet. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to the whole system, the whole body, and we're focusing on what I can control. We're always going to acknowledge the right foot hurts, but can we expand our awareness so that pain becomes a smaller character in the story of our life? I was going to say that's curiosity. It's just like, when you're in that darkness and when you're feeling overwhelmed, scared, and you're completely lost, don't let go of curiosity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Autograde Podcast. My name is Daniel Lugo. I'm your host, and today I have Jeffrey Bone here as a guest, and today is going to be a great day. I think we are going to learn a lot from Jeffrey. And Jeffrey, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, thank you very much for having me. First and foremost, it's very kind of you. And I was a mental health practitioner. I had my own office about a decade ago, and developed sinusitis and just this horrible head pain. And went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and like normal people do. And I was prescribed prednisone. And once I took that prednisone, my body flipped out. Bladder pain, my feet were vibrating. It felt like a neurological concussion, couldn't remember things, fatigue. It was horrible. I went to all the different doctors, the neurologist, the internist, other ENTs, and they didn't really have much of anything really for me. It's like I was like falling through the medical cracks, and I'm just feeling worse and worse physically. And eventually I did find a doctor that did some blood work and urinalysis showed that, yeah, he thought I had some mold problems somewhere. So I got someone to test the office, test the house. Well, in the HVAC of my office, I had 2 different species of mold that was neurotoxic. And I had just been marinating myself in this neurotoxic mold for years and years and years on end. And so I go through a whole protocol with him, do all the treatments, do all these things to try to heal myself. And I'm better. I do feel better, but I don't have any good days. There are no good days. I still feel sick. And I was going to go to the Mayo Clinic, and I decided, no, let me just look at the directory at the local hospital. Let me see if there's any kind of departments I haven't seen any doctors from. And so I saw one that was listed as toxicology. And I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling pretty toxic. Let me try there. And he doesn't believe the mold stuff. And it's like, I don't care. That doesn't matter. Just test me and tell me what you think. Well, he tests my immunoglobulins, and those were clinically low. And so then he sends me to the immunologist, and the immunologist gives me a vaccine. And I come back a month later to see if I developed antibodies to the vaccine. Does the vaccine work? Well, I don't develop antibodies. And so what do I have? I have common variable immune deficiency. That's what I have now. And I have to infuse myself with immunoglobulins once a week so I can have that missing piece of my immune system. And that was a recap of multiple years and a whole lot of misery and a lot of trying to find myself after the illness.
Wow, I think, wow, you went through a lot of medical doctors and different departments. I'm
Yes.
surprised. Me myself, I went through almost 4 years of medical issues.
Oh,
But
sorry
I
to
stay
hear.
almost with the same doctors. But for you, it's like this found something, but this one found something different. But then you went to another doctor. So
Yes.
wow, wow, a lot of doctors.
And it just depends on the illness, because some of it was just the normal traditional doctors, some of it was functional medicine doctors, and they all have their blind spots. and they all have their kind of imperfections, and it depends on what blood work that they kind of check on the box, and what are they looking for, and are they looking at for like a very specific part, like, well, let me see how your kidneys are functioning. It's like, or we test your genes or do things of that nature, or are we looking at the whole system? And I had a whole system issue, and that's where I have my immunologist now. So, like immunology or rheumatology, you're looking at this larger system rather than just looking at the kidneys or the liver or digestive system. And so I'd have symptoms in all these places, but I really needed someone that was looking at a part of my body. And trust me, I had never been to an immunologist before. I had no clue who they were, but for me, they're rather important now. They're a big piece of my life.
And at least now you have an answer. You,
I do, yes. I
you
don't
went
have
for a
this.
while looking for one.
Yes, and I am much better with the immunoglobulins. I still have chronic pain, pain in my foot, pain in my head, and I still have fatigue that I deal with, but I'm much better than what I was before I got the right diagnosis, before I got the immunoglobulins, infused. And I do it myself. I do it at home. I stick 2 needles into myself. I wish it was a nice little pill that I could take, but I have to put these 2 needles into the sides of into my abdomen, and I infuse the medication. It takes about an hour or so to infuse it. So you get used to it, and I'm appreciative that I have it because there are a lot of people before me that wouldn't have had this. They would have had my disease, but they wouldn't have had that answer. So even though it's inconvenient and it's not the best thing in the world to do, I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do it.
No, I'm glad that you have that now, but I feel sorry for you because I don't know what that feels like. And not specifically injecting some. Well, I do have experience injecting myself in the abdomen. It's horrible, but
Yes.
I feel for you. And you just share with us that you have a prolonged exposure to black mold in your
Yes.
office.
Correct.
Before this happened, you were a psychologist treating patients. What
Yes.
was it like psychologically to suddenly find yourself on the other side of the desk as a patient?
Well, it was humbling. I was scared. I mean, I was, because at the end of the day, I'm a human. It doesn't matter if I have a doctorate. I'm a human, and I'm lost, and I'm overwhelmed by emotions. I can't sleep. I cry a lot. It feels dark. I get depressed. It's a devastating time in my life, and it was just very confusing and very lost. And so it was basically an identity collapse for myself.
Yeah, when you are in this patient side is horrible because one day you feel good and the other day you feel bad.
Yes.
You go
And
through a
then
lot of roller coaster.
it is, and then, that's where I first started off writing poetry, and I will not try to pretend that I'm a good poet or anyone should read any of my poetry, absolutely not, but I wrote and published some poems because I needed to find a voice. I needed to find some element in my life that I could control somewhat, because I can't control the pain, it's not so easy. I can't just have a new immune system and start over. I can't have all the chaos that I went through just, erase from my brain and, get a redo of the past 10 years. So I needed to find a voice for it. And that's where I ended up doing poetry, I find creating chronic illness journals and some other books, as well as the podcast that I do, which is called To the Bone, Conversations on Pain, Illness, and Meaning. Of course, it's called To the Bone. Why wouldn't I name it after myself that way? Absolutely rim shot that. And so, and it's all in an effort of finding my particular voice and being able to try to achieve solidarity with others, finding others who are also dealing with illness and are struggling and would benefit from the stories that I share.
I think you hit a really important point, and I've spoken about this in previous podcasts. And it's the importance of finding something that drives you forward. Because if you
Yes.
stick yourself down to the ground when you're in the darkest moment and you don't find a way out, there's no way that you're gonna survive. Right? For me, at least, it was. For me, I'm a Yankees fan. I'm a baseball fan.
Yes. I
So
was
for me, when
born
I
in New York City. That's where I was born, in
oh, that's cool.
Manhattan. Yeah.
And but I suddenly found myself watching the games, and
Yes.
that was my way of expressing myself out to
Yes. Something
to
to
the
look
world.
forward
Let's
to
say.
and have momentum. Absolutely. That makes sense. And you were excited to find out what's the next matchup, who's pitching, who has a good run going, what's Aaron Judge doing, and it's like something to get your mind off of, but it has momentum to it, and it gives you something to look forward to. Because when you are dealing with a medical problem, people don't realize you end up grieving a lot of the future because you're healthy, you're moving along, and you think that life's just going to go on as it has always gone on. But all of a sudden, this medical problem introduces itself, and all of a sudden, you're having to grieve things and grieve dreams, ideas, things that you thought were going to happen a certain way. All of a sudden, they're not going to happen that way because of the illness. And so, when you're able to put yourself onto something else and to kind of use that as encouragement, motivation, then you can see that future and it kind of it's almost like a gravitational pull. And I could see it working really well.
And it does. When you find that thing, it's gonna drive you forward and help you. It helped me. For you, it was poetry. For me, it was watching not only baseball but other sports.
Sure.
And finding that thing is gonna really help someone. So if you're listening to this and you haven't found that thing, don't worry. You're gonna find it. And once you find it, pursue it because that thing is gonna help you become the better version of yourself that is going to the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if anyone's ever seen, I've done this a long time ago. I'm not really a skier, but instead of just a chairlift on some of the smaller slopes, you just grab a rope and it just kind of pulls you up the hill. And hopefully you don't slip and fall. But it's a great way to be able to get up the hill rather than just walking up the hill. And that's what we need in life. What's the rope that we can grab onto that's going to pull us up this hill that we're kind of having to deal with? And in our world, it's chronic illness. And what does that kind of look like? And it could be a craft, it could be a garden, it could be taking care of your pet, it could be following the Yankees or hating the Red Sox, whatever it is, it's kind of like it can be whatever you like, but it's your thing that helps you get pulled up the hill.
Yes. So I think that's a great answer. You have spoken about experiencing multiple diagnoses, trying to find the answer. For
Yes.
someone listening to this, who knows something is deeply wrong with their body, but it's being dismissed and they're being told that it's all in their head, what advice do you have for them to navigate that specifically lonely gray area?
Yeah, I've definitely found that when a doctor says it's all in your head, they've stopped being curious. They've put a period at the end of the sentence, and they're not going to look for other options. And this is a major problem. In some insurances, you may be locked into seeing certain doctors, and if you have the ability, the privilege to be able to find another doctor, because one of the things that I have found that and one of the traits that I'm always looking for is that person still curious. I need my doctor to be curious about what's going on. And once that stops, and I've seen it multiple times, it's like, okay, I think it's this. And then they kind of move on. Okay, maybe it's this. And then they kind of move on. Mind you, whatever they say, whatever they recommend, sure as heck isn't helping me. And whatever they thought it was wasn't the problem. And so it's the hardest thing because you want to fight for yourself and advocate for yourself to that individual doctor. And if that's your only choice, then by all means advocate, bring in additional information, use ChatGPT, use AI as your friend here to kind of, reinforce some of the things, like why aren't we running this test? What are the other options? What's the differential diagnosis? Um, Why do we stop here when we haven't looked at these other areas? But for the most part, if you can, and it's a privileged position, find another doctor so you can start that conversation again. And I have found doctors who will radically differ in their opinions. And the exact same problem, exact same imaging, exact same blood work can have very, very different opinions. And it shouldn't differ that much, but it can. And that just speaks to the imperfection of the human experience.
I agree with that. I've been blessed with my journey of having incredible doctors. They have spoken honestly to me about everything. There was one doctor that said, you know, your problem is not something that I have experience in. I'm sending you to somebody that does have more experience in this than me.
Absolutely. That's my second. That's one of the things. So I love doctors that are curious. And it's like, but I always think it's a great answer. I don't know. Because a lot of times doctors feel like they need to fill in the blank. And that's why it's like, oh, it's psychological. Look, I answered it. I answered the question. It's psychological. And then we kind of get lost in the world of therapy when we should be looking for a biological answer. And so, I really, really appreciate any and all doctors that are willing to say, I don't know. Let me see if I can get you to the right referral source.
Yeah, I think that's important because when we are finding that pain, and for you it was chronic pain, for me it was Crohn's disease, so pretty
Yes.
close. So when we finding that, we need not only trying to find the solution, but
Yes.
if you don't have one, you don't have to actually answer. Say I don't
Yes.
know, because that's the better part, and you can ask this from your doctor. To be completely honest with you, there was another doctor, a surgeon, that said, if you want to go through this surgery, it's a complicated one. I don't know how, I mean, I don't have the experience. So
Yes.
I'm going to recommend you to someone that does have the experience with this kind of surgery so that you
Perfect.
can go through it. That's the thing,
Yeah.
being
They weren't
completely
trying to
honest
cash a
and
check.
open.
They were trying to give you and make sure that you had the best treatment possible. And
Yeah,
so,
for me, this is not paid by them, but I'm
yeah.
a huge thank for the Houston Methodist Hospital. They always were sincere with me, but that's an important part of finding a doctor that is completely honest with you
Sure.
and is speaking to you not only as a patient but as a friend.
Yes. And when they respect you as a human being, not just a case number, just not as a patient file, but they see Daniel and they see that person there and they respect and they want to help this person and they know he's struggling and they don't want to just do the simplest thing, the easiest thing, the thing that gets them paid, but they really want to make sure that Daniel grows up to be like the most healthy individual possible, and that takes humility. That says, you know what? I don't have that skill. I don't have that knowledge. And some doctors, they don't have that humility to be, completely honest. They don't. And that, ends up, hurting a lot of patients in different ways because they don't get to the right doctors or they don't get the right diagnosis or they're just led down the wrong path as if it's, the world of psychology, therapy. Guess what? It was not going to cure your Crohn's. And someone could say, "Oh, you're stressed out." We know people that have upset stomachs. They get, they're often stressed out, and we need to deal with the stress. Wouldn't have helped the Crohn's. You still needed the surgery.
For sure. And going to the next question, we both know how chronic pain and illness can sometimes be invisible to the outside world.
Yes.
How can people like us who have gone through this kind of method of illness effectively communicate their reality to our loved ones who want to understand but ultimately cannot feel what we're feeling?
Also, pain is unshareable. You can't feel the pain that I have in my body right now. I have chronic pain right this second. You don't know where, you don't know what it feels like. I can give you metaphors. I could say it feels like my foot is in a campfire, it's burning, my toes are burning, but you can't feel that. You don't know that, but you could choose to believe it. And we have to accept that we have to just allow people to believe us or not believe us because we don't have power over that. There's a quote that I always use, which is David Foster Wallace, which is, how can I have all of this inside me, but to you, it's just words? You have your feelings, your pains, your worries, your thoughts. You have all this stuff in you, but when you share it, it just is shared with words. And then what someone does with those words, you can't really control whether they believe or if they don't believe. And people have compassion fatigue, and people have, limitations of their understanding on the other side. And at the end of the day, we have to have realistic expectations that, sometimes they can tolerate it and handle this difficult situation, and sometimes they can't. It's just the reality. But what you want to do is find your social support group, your network, whether it's doctors, whether it's friends, whether it's social media, whether it's therapy, whether it's group, whether it's just other people where you do feel listened to and that you do feel kind of respected and heard and understood. Um, Not everyone can give that to you. And as much as you would want your family to give that to you, your family may not be capable of giving that to you. I think a lot of, if not most families probably are, but not every family. Not every family's capable of that.
Yeah, they try their best,
Yes.
but in no certain way they're gonna feel the way you feel.
Never.
They can give you help,
Hmm.
and but at the end, it's on you
Yes.
to handle everything. So this goes into my next question. When your body suddenly betrays you or changes drastically, it is easy to feel disconnected from it.
Yes.
How do you help your coaching clients rebuild a sense of identity and self worth when their physical capabilities have shifted?
One, we want to be able to label things as safe as possible within the body. We want to anchor ourselves when it's reasonable. Let's just say someone comes in and it's just like, yeah, I have this horrible back pain. And, I'm not going to label any of that safe until they've had the chance to get the x rays, the MRI, see the orthopedic doctor, and they know what the diagnosis is, they know what they're dealing with, and this is the diagnosis. But once we know all of that information, we want to anchor ourselves with the sense of the smoke alarm is going off in our body and it means well. It's trying to alert us to danger, but danger doesn't necessarily exist in this moment. And since danger doesn't exist, then it's ultimately a safe experience. It's a very unpleasant experience. Pain is real, discomfort is real, but there can be safety within pain and discomfort as well. Not only that, we tend to kind of focus on the body parts that hurt. So my right foot's burning right now. And because of that, I'm not focusing on my left foot. But in reality, I have 2 feet. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to the whole system, the whole body, and we're focusing on what I can control. And yes, I need to be aware of the other foot, and I need to hold both of those at the same time, or at least I pendulate kind of back and forth. Can't do that all the time, but I can do that as an exercise at times when I get overwhelmed. But even though my right foot may hurt, it burns, I can still use it. So part of this goes back into where's my freedom and where's the meaning that I can ultimately leverage within my own life. So I may have a situation where I have a burning foot, for the past 10 years, but this burning foot, it's walked the streets of New York City. Not too long ago, it has, and I have been on the sand and I have, walked, different trails. I've gone to the grocery store. I can walk upstairs. It enables me, and the story of me is not, erased because I still have capability. I still have control. Now, the thing is, a lot of that control and capability we kind of are aware of, but we don't necessarily think of it. It's not in like that front of mind, top of mind awareness which is to say, I'm the storyteller of my own life. And yes, all of these unfortunate things are real and the pain is real, but I am still the storyteller. I am the author of this existence. And as such, I can still tell my story of what I can do and what I have been able to accomplish. I may have an immune disorder, I may have chronic pain, but I can still talk to you on this call right now. I can see you, you can see me, I can hear you, I can talk. My lungs are working, my brain, ears, eyes, all working. And so that is the great, and those things are kind of constants, and we forget about that. It's almost with that it's like we forget about the air until there's wind, until the wind's hitting our face. Now, the atmosphere is always there. I can fan myself and I can feel that brush across me. It's always there, just like our strengths are always there. And then we have to decide how can we utilize that in a meaningful manner for that individual, because there's not one yellow brick road. There's not like, oh, okay, you have these healths, okay, so you should do this in life or you should do this in life. There's no yellow brick road. That does not exist whatsoever. So you have to decide in terms of your own values, not my values, not somebody else's values, of how you want to leverage the skills that you have. You know, it's like not everyone has the size of Aaron Judge. You know, Aaron Judge, a famous baseball player, he's got a ton of power. We're probably not going to put him as center fielder. We're not going to put him as shortstop. You know, he's going to play first base and he's going to be our power hitter because his skills go here. Okay, we got this really kind of smaller, quick, fast twitch muscle kind of guy, steals a lot of bases. We're going to put that guy in shortstop because those his skills going to fit into that position. Well, in the positions of life, we don't have necessarily the physical attributes in terms of baseball, but we're talking much more in terms of values of how is it that you want to live this life? I know at some point for you, Daniel, you decided I want to have a podcast. I want to broadcast a message out to the masses and to the people, and that was something that was valuable to me or to you, which was it was also valuable to me. I wanted to be a guest on shows like yours, as well as to have my own version of a podcast. So, and again, that came from a value, an intention that we had control over, and here we are. We both have microphones and headphones, even though mine are not as fancy as yours. And, we're able to get things accomplished. But it all started off with an intention. It all started off with valuing what we have to work with.
I think you hit everything was incredible. I think that that answer was great. But 2 points really stood out to me. One was the being not paying attention to the things that are constant. I think that goes with gratitude.
Yes,
When we find ourselves going through the things that go through the normal things in life and you compare it to someone that doesn't have, for example, there are kids that do not have food on the table, right? But
true.
you have constant 3 meals a day,
Yes,
or you wake up in the morning. That's already a blessing. Not many
yes,
get to wake up in the
absolutely.
morning.
Absolutely.
So when you look at that, I also wanted to ask you this question. I know your right foot is burning right now,
Yes.
but would you suggest to someone to focus on the left foot that isn't burning to
And
eliminate that pain?
I would say focus on both. I always believe in expanding the awareness because we're never trying to gaslight ourselves. We're never trying to lie to ourselves. We're never trying to pretend like, oh, the right foot, doesn't hurt. We're always going to acknowledge the right foot hurts. But can we expand our awareness so that pain becomes a smaller character in the story of our life? And so, right now it may make up less than 1% of my body, the toes that are burning, but it makes up a lot of my attention because I'm very aware of it, and so kind of percentage wise, it's taking up too much of my attention. And so what I want to do is increase my awareness to, and again, it may be on other parts of my body, but it can also be of the room around me. And this is why I love talking to people. When I'm focused on this conversation and trying to come up with a decent answer to give you kind of quality information here, I'm focused on you, which is expanding my awareness. And so I'm being mindful of expanding my awareness and using that as a modality of diminishing the awareness of my pain.
That's great. And I think another point that you hit before was finding a purpose.
Yes.
And I think when we are going through something hard, finding a purpose is pretty difficult.
Yes. Yes, it
But
is.
that answer is gonna come some way in some form. For
If
me
you
and for
stay
you
cur
was to start
Yeah.
the podcast. Here you go.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's curiosity. It's just like, don't when you're in that darkness and when you're feeling overwhelmed, scared, and you're completely lost, don't don't let go of curiosity, because there was a point where podcasting was not something that either one of us was focused on, but we were sitting and we were curious. It's like, oh, should I write a book, or should I do this, or should I become a speaker? What should I do? What would be easy? What would be fun? What would be interesting? There was a place where that curiosity bubbled up, the idea of podcasting. And so when you're lost, it's okay to be lost, but be lost with curiosity.
And how would you suggest to someone to use their curiosity to find that answer?
And so it starts off with, the values, and again, the easiest place to start off with is, how were you living before you got sick? What was important to you? How did you spend your money? How did you spend your time, your energy? What did you care about? What was important to you? And so we can look at that, and that past life, the past life that we may have had to grieve, or we have to set down, let go of, accept, but we can still pay attention to who that person was and where did they put their money and their time, their energy, their emotions. And there's also something as simple as typing in acceptance commitment therapy, ACT values worksheet, and you'll see many examples of this because that particular brand of therapy talks about a lot of values. So you'll see these worksheets that have like 60 different values. And now the point is not to say like you're going to be 60 different things, but as you're going through, like, what are the two or three things there that really strike you as you're like, that's really important to me? Like for myself, I like learning. That's really important to me. And I like helping, and I like to learn different things so I can help other people. And that's I'm a caretaker by nature. That's my archetype. That's just who I am. I like helping other people. Doing things for myself really isn't all that exciting for myself a lot of times, but I get really excited and I have a lot of joy helping other people, and that's just my nature.
I think that's a great point because by going back, you can see what parts of you enjoy without that part of you that is missing now.
Yes,
So I think finding that thing is going to help you find your purpose. And going to that, your own podcast explores pain, illness, and meaning, right?
yes.
How do we look for meaning or purpose in something without falling into the trap of toxic positivity?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of toxic positivity at all. And what liked and what I've enjoyed about the podcast is that there is no one yellow brick road. There isn't just one meaning. And I've used that example before. And there are so many different voices. when you think about, you look up different books and philosophers, different artists in terms of how they expressed how to, and there's some people they would want it to be very flowery and lots of metaphors. Some people want it to be like very like straightforward, no metaphors. We call it what it is. We don't make it pretty. And, that is what we do. And so there's a lot of variability into it. Sometimes, there's some people that say, okay, I want to see this as a blessing. I want to see this as this is going to enable me to do great things in this world. How am I going to leverage this poor, unfortunate medical hand that I've been dealt, and I'm going to use this as a blessing? And other people are like, no, we are not going to call it a blessing. It isn't a blessing. It is difficult. It is rough. And I am not here to try to pretend that it's anything more than a really difficult moment in my life at this time. And so there's a lot of flexibility to that, because when we talk about the future and what we're aiming for, no one can tell the future. No one has a crystal ball, but you get to have that exploration. And you have to almost revert back to being a kid again. And it's like in elementary school, before you were too cool to like play in the jungle gym, where you'd go out and like sometimes you would kick the ball, you play soccer, you play baseball, you play on the jungle gym, you get on the swings, you go and you play a little bit on all the different equipment. And that's a little bit of what you have to do, is that you have to mentally play with these different ideas so that you can find what rings true for you. Um, I've tried to paint. I'm a terrible. My poetry may be bad, but my painting is even worse. And so it's kind of like, but I needed to play with that a little bit. And I've played with lots of different ideas. I still do. The other day I was thinking about, what if I could be more of like a public speaker and go to different events and do public speaking associated with that. And it was just an idea that I had, and I talked to somebody about it. And I don't really know what I'll do with it, whether I'll pursue it or I won't pursue it. But it's just this idea that I had this curiosity for, like, let me play with this idea a little bit. Because adults are too serious. And when we get into medical problems, we can get too serious here. I'm not here to try to pretend that like, oh, what a lovely opportunity here. We get to play all day. It's like, no, but we have to loosen up our mind. We can't be so rigid, because we have to craft a new story based on new capacities. And so that's what it is. And again, what is that story? What's that story that you say about the world, yourself, and you in this world?
I think that goes back to being curious. I think
Yes.
if you keep your mind open, I think you are, I mean, you're closer than someone that has their mind closed, because finding
One
that thing is going to help you move forward.
Absolutely. And so I never want someone to ever feel like, sometimes people say, I need to stop thinking negative. It's like, no, you don't have to stop thinking negative. I tell people all the time, you do not have to stop thinking negative. But do want you to be flexible with your thoughts. I want you to be able to think positive, negative, neutral. I want the whole spectrum. It's like telling people, I want you to use all the crayons in the crayon box, not just the positive crayons. I want you to use the negative crayons too, because it's really about the oscillation, the flexibility between those different, types of thoughts or nervous system. It's like there is, because there's not a destination. Oh, I want you to just hold on to this one positive thought, and that will be the thing that will be your shining light, your north star, and everything's going to be fine. Doesn't exist. There is no one thought. There's no one destination here. But if we can stay as flexible as possible, and we can go in and out of negativity, positivity, then we have opportunities to tell different stories for ourselves as different things come up. Because when it comes with chronic illness, well, it's like, okay, well, we'll tell a new story. It's like, okay, you told yourself a new story. Then all of a sudden a flare hits you and you're flared for a few days. Well, we have to tell a different story, because the person that's flared is different than the person that's not flared. and you have to be flexible with the story. Before, chronic illness, people tend to be the same story day after day after day. It usually doesn't change so much, but it could be fatigue, it could be a flare, it could be a migraine, it could be lots of different things that bring us down. And then that's where we have to be very flexible with the storytelling that we're engaged in.
I would like to bring in a counterpoint because I think it is important to have one positive thought, right?
Sure,
I agree with the flexibility, right? We have to be positive and negative, and I might be wrong because actually, when I look at a situation, I prepare myself for the worst situation, and if it doesn't happen, that's okay. But I was
sure.
prepared. I
Yes,
look at the worst case scenario, and if I'm prepared for that, I'm prepared for everything else.
yes,
So, what I think is if someone has a positive thought, and I'm not saying that a positive thought is going to carry you over and you're not going to have any negative thoughts. That's impossible.
yes, yes,
But to have that positive of saying, I'm alive today, for example,
yes,
I get another chance.
yes,
I think having one positive thought can carry you over, not eliminating and say, let's be flexible on, let's have some positive, then some negative. But I think when you are in that, you can fall into a trap of falling too deep into the negative because
yes.
negative
No, no,
thoughts weigh
absolutely.
heavier
Yeah, I agree. I
than
agree.
positive.
And that's why I absolutely want some positive thoughts, and I want some realistic positive thoughts. I can be an anxious person sometimes, and so the anxiety comes on, and I'm about to do something. Let's just say I'm about to go on a podcast and talk to a stranger that I've never talked to in my entire life. I'm going to tell them all kinds of personal things about me, and I'm feeling anxious. And I would say something like, "Okay, it's okay to feel anxious. Let's go be brave. Let's go be brave. We can do this with anxiety. Let's go be brave. We can do this. We've been on podcasts before. We've talked to other people before. We've done this before. So this is not going to be a new experience, and we can go do something that's brave." And so that bravery and the emphasis on the bravery would be, within that realm of being positive. And so I think it is important, it's like we're not just constantly going, back and forth, or just existing in the middle. Sometimes we are going to be negative because we're human, but it's important to practice the positivity. And why is it important to practice the positivity? But we don't want to be blind to the negative, but at the same time, we want to practice the positivity so that we're more familiar with it. The brain will go to what's familiar. And so neurons that fire together are wired together. That's the Hebbian principle. A more new age way of saying it is energy flows where attention goes. Well, you have to give yourself a fighting chance to focus on the win, the positivity, the way that it's going to work out. You can't have a baseball player walking up to the plate going like, I'm going to strike out. I'm going to suck at this. I'm so going to strike out. No, you have to go win, no matter what happened the last two at bats, this time you're going to hit the ball. You are focused on hitting the ball this time. On those last two at bats, don't matter. This is a whole new game right here.
That's a great example. When the fatigue or brain fog hits hard, high level psychological theories usually go out the window.
Yes.
What is one or two immediate that people can go right now and do micro mental skills that someone can use in a moment of acute physical or emotional overwhelm in their life?
I'm a big fan of self compassion. We get compassion from family and friends, but we typically don't give ourselves a lot of compassion, because one of the things, we give ourselves a hard time based on how we're domesticated in some ways. There's a great book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, and it talks a lot. And in the more that you pay attention to it, you can see it, of how we value ourselves based on society and society's expectations, society norms. And we have to, when we are sick and when we have to stay in bed for the day, well, you're not going to be as productive. Well, you're not so productive. Does that mean that you're worthless, that you're no good? No, not at all. But society will say as much because you're only as worth as you are productive. And so one of the things that we have to always turn to is being aware, is society's expectations influencing this moment, and in this moment can I be self-compassionate with myself? And if I was going to break down self-compassion, it would just be kind and fair. Are you being kind to yourself? Are you being fair to yourself?
So before we end the podcast, if there is one person listening right now who feels completely misunderstood, exhausted, and ready to give up on finding an answer for their health problems, what is one thing you want them to know today?
Well, the thing is, and this may sound morbid at first, but it brings us back to the present to hopefully give us more hope. And the Greek Stoics would say memento mori, which is in all things remember death, because we will all die. This is only a short ride for all of us. And so death will find us at some point, but you don't have death right now. If you can hear my voice, you probably are not dead, and you are alive and I'm alive and I see you and you're not and isn't that so special that we are still alive? To remember death isn't to amplify death, it's to amplify life, it's to amplify possibilities. And it's kind of like you want to be going back to that place of gratitude. And you want to think there's nothing new under the sun. It's like, yes, you're hopeless. Maybe these are not the right people to be treating you. Maybe there's other things for you to explore. Maybe there's other books, other communities, there are lots of different ill people in a lot of different ways online, be great sources of information. Artificial intelligence can sometimes be helpful. It can give you wrong advice, but it can also expand your awareness, especially if you're not responding to certain things. I don't treat it as the absolute truth, but it can be interesting in terms of providing different opportunities to talk to different people and using certain language that they may understand when it comes to the doctors. But at the end of the day, it's like, yes, memento mori, death is not here and we have opportunities, and let's see what we can do with those opportunities.
Yeah, make use of those opportunities that we have right now to make a
Yes,
better future for ourselves.
absolutely. And to come
Let's
on
not
your
waste any
podcast.
moment. So I can
But
listen
here
to the last
it's
part.
kind of like you have illness, I have illness. We've both dealt with illness, but we expanded our lives. I never wrote a poem. I never published a book. I never did any of those different things or had a podcast before I was ill. Every single one of my creations, every single one of them only came after I was ill. So in some ways, the illness shrank my life. In other ways, I expanded my life after my illness.
I completely agree with that because for me too, I could like I have my book finished. It is in Polish, but it's finished.
Oh,
But
congratulations.
thank you. But I wouldn't have that book written if I didn't go through my journey
Yes.
or have this podcast or have this knowledge that I have right now if I didn't go through my journey.
Yes.
I have told my friends, and a friend asked me this not long ago. He asked me if you could go back and change it all, wouldn't you? And I said no. He was amazed about my answer
Yes.
because I said if I didn't go through all the surgeries, all the many things I had to go through, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have today. I wouldn't be
Yes.
appreciated of the life that I have if I didn't go through the journey I went through. Everything
Absolutely.
I have right now is from the surgeries. Even
Yes.
your friendship came after the surgery. So
Yes.
if I take a introspective look at about how the surgery changed my life, and speak of this in the book, it changed a lot of things,
It
but it
does.
also brought a lot of things.
Yes, it does. And
So I
that's the
think it works wonders.
opportunity. Yeah, that's the expanded life right there.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you came here on the podcast today to share
Well,
this.
thank you very much for having me and inviting me on. I appreciate it tremendously.
Where can people find you?
If they want to find me, they can go to drbone.live. That's DRBONE.live. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Oh, that's great. I will leave that link down in the description. Thank you so much for coming over again. Thank you so much for the audience for listening to the podcast. I hope that this helped you in some way and somehow. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with the people that you know so that we can keep spreading this message across the world. Thank you so much again. May God bless you all. Take care.